Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Venetia, and today I'd like to lay down my speculations and overanalysis on what eternal sugar could possibly be before she gets released. Before any of you start freaking out, should there be another major leak in the future, I'd make a part 2 for this video. I really just want to pump this one out so I could call dibs should I be proven correct. Now, the overanalysis will be divided into 3 main parts: name analysis, design analysis, and miscellaneous ones. Without further ado, let's go. Eternal Sugar is the beast of sloth. From these titles alone, I can already tell that they'll most likely take some inspiration from the 7 deadly sins in Christian mythology. Though before any of you start freaking out, screaming that they're based off of Greek mythology, let's first go through the components of their name one by one. Without getting ahead of myself, I can say beyond a shadow of a doubt that the beast of sloth will 100% be based off of Hellenism, or the culture and values of those who reside in ancient Greece. I think everyone with a pulse has had an encounter with ancient Greek mythology, so I wouldn't be explaining much on this part. But I'll be explaining why that is as we go through with the video. With that context out of the way, let's first get the word eternal and put it in the context of Hellenic ideals. When something is eternal, it means that it is in perpetuity or never ending, oftentimes used in the context of having eternal life and immortality as a whole. They are associated with the gods and goddesses who live on Mount Olympus, which is the closest thing Greek gods had with a content house, for lack of a better word. The concept of eternity for the ancient Greeks is not one of linear nature. Similar to Mystic Flower's inspirations of cyclical ideals, eternity is the nature of looping time, where creation, destruction, and rebirth is a repeating process. I'd also like to point out that the beast's motifs heavily take on some cultural inspirations from the same eras as their ancient counterpart. The usage of sarcophagus and hieroglyphics on golden cheese implies heavy Middle Eastern influences, whilst burning spice also takes on some inspiration from similar sources. Mystic and cacao are based off of Eastern mythos, shadow milk and pure vanilla have several Christian, medieval, and Western symbolisms, and holly berry is based off of European culture and aristocracy. Now, with this in mind, I'd also like to point out that the word Renaissance or Renaissance means rebirth, which further ties in with the whole concept of eternity and the entire Renaissance movement in Europe during the 14th to 17th century, which was basically a transition period between medieval times and the present. In a way, I'd also like to point out that the Renaissance movement took heavy inspirations from ancient Greek and Roman philosophies and art. Moving on to the next part of her name, sugar. Sugars are carbohydrates, which means they are quickly broken down by your body for energy. Not only are they sweet, but they are generally associated with happiness and fun, as on a chemical level, they are responsible for making our brain release dopamine, or the hormones that put us in a happier mood. However, an article written by Brendan DeMello titled "How Does Sugar Affect Our Brain?" shows us that too much sugar in search of more dopamine bursts and serotonin overload leads to fatigue. Now, serotonin, according to this article, is in limited stock in our brain. When we eat too much sugary stuff, we suckle too much of this stocked up happy chemical, which in turn leaves us miserable, sad, and exhausted. Now, I think you can see where I'm going with this. Sloth is defined by lethargy and inactivity, the same things associated with eternal sugar as a beast. Perhaps her skills would be similar to a sugar rush, maybe even lengthening the cooldown of your cookies as they are affected by the sluggish effects of too much sugar. I'd also like to add that sugar within the context of Cookie Run Kingdom can be attributed to 2 things: the sugar quarry and sugar swan. The sugar quarry has this as its description: cookie sugar cutters never forget to pay respects to the sugar golems in their centurial slumber, who eventually became plentiful sources of sugar. Which means that sugar is a mineral or ore, perhaps even a fossil of some sort. Now, this reminds me a lot of how we view ancient Greek architecture, fossils of a bygone era, with columns of marble being the only remnants and proof of their architectural style. Sugar swan, on the other hand, bears avian characteristics similar to eternal sugar. Perhaps these two are connected in a way. Or maybe those who are powerful and sugary in nature bear bird-like characteristics in their design. Well, there will be more things related to Sugar Swan, but I'll keep my mouth shut for now. Moving on to the most obvious part of her association with Greek mythology, her title as Beast of Sloth can be linked to Iurgia, the lesser goddess of sloth, idleness, and laziness, and a guard in Hypno's court in the underworld. Hypnos is the god of catching some Z's, aka sleeping, and Iurgia is described as a torpid or sluggish guard of his court. Specifically, the Latin poet Statius says the following about her. In the hollow recesses of a deep and rocky cave sit the halls of lazy Somnus or Hypnos, sleep, and his untroubled dwelling. The threshold is guarded by shady quis, or whatever, quiet, and dull oblivio or lethi, I hate myself, forgetfulness, and torpid ignavia or iurgia, sloth, with ever drowsy countenance. With this, we can conclude that she is not only scientifically but also mythologically acquainted with the concept of drowsiness, being tired, and being sleepy. As sloth is a deprivation of passion or idleness, one can say it is uniquely intertwined with the concept of happiness, as one can be considered happy by lazing around doing nothing as the burden of responsibility is not on their shoulders. But someone can also be just as happy doing some hard work themselves. Inevitably, happiness is a gray area of duality. Perhaps the same duality would be evident with Halle Berry and Eternal Sugar's design. Let's start with the most obvious parts of her design. Unlike Shadow Milk and Mystic Flower, whose colors are the opposite of Pure Vanilla and Dark Cacao respectively, Eternal Sugar is just as pink as Halle Berry. So far, the only other example is Burning Spice with Golden Cheese, and you can see how Golden Cheese's yellow complements Burning Spice's fiery red. I don't really know what could be the reasoning for that, probably just a design choice, or perhaps a way of telling us that these two, regardless of their motive, are still two sides of the same coin. Before I turn into a mumbling theorist, which I already am, I have a lot of talking points concerning Eternal Sugar. First, basing purely off of color, the first thing that came to my mind was Aphrodite, the goddess of love, beauty, and passion in Greek mythology. It definitely fits her motive as well, as sweet things are often associated with romance. Her little crown also features an inverted heart, and looking back into the lens of ancient Rome, this could be a reference to the extinct Silphium plant, a heart-shaped plant used as a contraceptive and an aphrodisiac before getting cultivated to extinction. A contraceptive is basically birth control, and an aphrodisiac is a certain food that can amp someone's instincts to aid in the genetic furthering of our species. Now, Aphrodite's main animal was the dove, and from what we can see from Eternal Sugar's design, her wings somewhat resemble an avian creature's with a fluffy white body. Looking at the anatomy of a dove's wing, the similarities are quite undeniable. The halo also looks like it's from an angel, though the concept of halos do exist in Greek mythology and are often associated with beings of divine or celestial origin. While we're on the topic of Aphrodite and the divine, allow me to make a little side note here. Because in Roman mythos, Venus, the Roman version of Aphrodite, is referred to as the morning star and even has the Latin name of Lucifer. Now, you know where I'm going with this if you've watched my video about Shadow Milk, but we all know that nothing good comes out of anyone associated with Lucifer. Interestingly, the planet Venus is also called the evening star due to it being the first visible thing in the sky during dawn and dusk. Fun fact. This can also be the reason why snakes can be seen as something intertwined with Eternal Sugar's concept art. As you can see in the images I'm flashing right now, specifically on the gazebo, you can see that the snake even has some wings, which is a characteristic of Ophis pterotos, I don't know, sorry, or the winged serpent responsible for guarding the frankincense groves of Arabia. I'd also like to take note that snakes in Greek mythology can either be a symbol of the cycle of life and death, like Hermes' staff, also known as the symbol used for medicine nowadays, and it can also be a symbol for the Hydra, a big snake that spawns even more big snakes the more you cut its head off. I'd like to think that these snakes serve a messenger-like purpose like Hermes. Perhaps they are not agents of deceit as often depicted in Christian theology, but as guards and helpers in Eternal Sugar's paradise. While we're on the topic of this specific concept art, I'd like to bring your attention to this little cookie on top of the fountain with a bow and arrow. I don't think I need to explain much on who this might be, as this is very obviously Eros or Cupid, Aphrodite's son and the god of romantic love. Yes, he is the random baby you see on Valentine's holding a bow and arrow, asking if you could be his Valentine. Perhaps similar to how Mystic has Hate, Burning Spices Nutmeg, Shadow Milk has Black Sapphire and Candy Apple, Eternal Sugar has something similar to a son or daughter-like sidekick. Another thing to note is Eternal Sugar's succubus-like design, as she possesses some bat wings and an arrow tail, which is a prevalent design with the succubi. For those uninitiated, succubi, the plural version of the word succubus, are a type of female demons that appear in dreams to men to seduce them to further the genetic agendas of their kind. I'd like to take note that the main thing with dreams can also be linked with Ayurja's status of being a guard in the court of the god of dreams in the underworld, which is ring-a-ding-a-ling, loops us back to the goddess of sloth. Now, if we look at the object they're holding, it is a lyre, an instrument associated with Apollo, the god of music, archers, the sun, and prophecy. Hermes originally invented the lyre from a tortoise shell, but gave it to Apollo after a little bit of trolling. However, I'd like to reshift your focus to that of Orpheus, a brilliant musician said to have mastered the lyre and bargained with Persephone, and Hades to get his wife back from the undead. Spoiler alert, by the way. Yeah, he lost his wife, Lamau. Again, almost everything about Eternal Sugar seems to be associated with love and sweetness, which is coincidental because the only other cookie in game with these similar connotations are Sugar Swan, the literal peak of the world or apotheosis that gave almost everything life. The design of the Sugar Swan is a little bit similar to Eternal Sugar's, which is coincidental because Aphrodite was often depicted with a swan, oftentimes having her chariot driven in the air by a flock of swans. They're both pink, and they both have these square-like dangling things, a few on Sugar Swan's tail and on both sides with Eternal Sugar's braids. Another thing of note is that it is very likely that Eternal Sugar resides in the Forgotten Sugar Paradise, a set of land just off the coast of the Jellyfish Ocean and above in terms of the y-axis from Sugar Swan's own desert paradise. If we analyze the images of Eternal Sugar's paradise and Sugar Swan's own, they're quite similar in nature, both in the vines, abundance of flowers, and even this one gazebo. I'd like to drop here that Sugar Swan is based off of the Swan Lake Ballet, which again is a romantic play of sorts. The main difference between Sugar Swan's paradise and Eternal Sugar's is the presence of ionic pillars, or these curly looking stuff found surrounding the corners of Eternal Sugar's leaked artwork. These are prevalent in ancient Greek architecture and are often associated with temples, particularly that of Hera on Samos. This could be a chosen deviation to distinguish the two from each other, but I feel they are heavily related, perhaps even allies in the past before Sugar Swan's corruption. I'd like to briefly mention the presence of the bleeding heart flower on this particular art for Eternal Sugar, which is used to symbolize deep love, emotional vulnerability, pain of heartbreak, and the ability to heal emotionally. Perhaps Eternal Sugar's lore would revolve around romance or love of some sort, as we all know that Holly Berry has a loving family and has cookies she greatly cherishes that are directly related to her. Perhaps the first part of the episode would revolve around familial issues with Holly Berry's kingdom, or maybe an apocalyptic scenario of hypnotized, sugar-rushed cookies in her kingdom. Either way, all I know is that I've been writing this for far too long and I'll save those theories in the future when we get even more leaks. But yeah, that's it. That's for my overanalysis. Thanks for listening to my ramblings and thank you for your support. We're almost at 10,000 subscribers and I'm really excited to write even more lore related stuff concerning other characters. Oh well, that's all. Toodles!